Hi, and welcome to Jules Voto's Photo Focus. In this video, I'm going to be going over the features and controls and how to use them on the Pentax H1a 35mm single lens reflex camera. Now the H1a is a very basic camera. It was introduced in 1962. And actually this is the first 35mm camera that I ever purchased. And I bought one new back in 1972 for $104 with the lens you see here, the 55mm 2.0. Now my camera I had sold a while back, actually traded it in on a Pentax Spotmatic. And this one I picked up on eBay a few years ago for around $30. So again, as I said, it's a very basic camera. It uses the Pentax 42mm screw thread lens mount, okay, which is a very popular lens mount. Many cameras, Mamiya's, Yashikas, some German cameras use this screw mount, use these screw mount lenses, including some of the Russian cameras. So H1a is a very compact, fully mechanical, all metal construction camera. Okay, it weighs 1 pound 5 ounces or 600 grams without a lens. By comparison, the Nicormat FTN weighs 1 pound 11 ounces without a lens. So this is 6 ounces lighter. Let's just start on the top right of the camera and go through all the controls. Okay, on the top right, you will see the shutter speed dial. This shutter speed dial turns 360 degrees. You could go completely around with it, unlike some. It has speeds from 1 to 1/500th of a second, including a B and a T setting. Now the B setting, when you press the shutter release, shutter opens and remains open until you release pressure from the shutter. The T setting, when you press the shutter release, the shutter remains open and stays open until you turn the shutter speed dial. Okay, use that for real long exposures. You will notice an X between a 30th and a 60th of a second. That is the electronic flash sync speed, which is 1/50th of a second, or you could use slower speeds. Okay, now you will also notice above and to the left of the shutter speed dial, when the shutter is cocked, that window there turns red. When you release the shutter, it clears. All right, so you know whether or not the shutter is cocked. And when you store this camera, or really any focal plane shutter camera, mechanical camera, you should not leave it stored for a length of time with the shutter cocked. So just release the shutter before putting it away. Okay, so to the right of your, oh, one other thing on the shutter speed dial, there's a little notch here. I don't know how well you can see it. That was for the external clip-on exposure meter. Okay, this camera has no meter, it takes no battery, but they did have an accessory clip-on meter that coupled to the shutter speed dial. Okay, over here we have our shutter release, which is threaded for a cable release. Nice smooth shutter. We also have our film advance lever, which must be wound in 1 full stroke. Okay, and it has about a 10-degree standoff position and about 160-degree stroke to advance the film, cock the shutter, and advance the frame counter. Okay, usually I come to the front of the camera at this point, to the front right side, and there's nothing there. There is no self-timer in this camera, so there's no controls on that front side. Okay, when we come to the right front side. When we come to the left side, we have our synchronization sockets here, our PC sockets. We have one, the upper one is for bulbs. The bottom is the X-Sync socket. So if you're using electronic flash, make sure you plug it into the bottom and make sure your shutter speed is a 50th of a second or slower, or else it will not sync with the flash. Okay, let's come back up here now to the top left side, and we have our rewind knob and crank. And you will note there's an R on the rewind knob, which makes sense, right? And it's in orange. Some early Pentax H1as either do not have the R or it is not in orange. You cannot mount the 50mm 1.4 lens on those cameras because the rear element extends a little bit into the mirror box and it would cause a problem. Now around the rewind knob, we have our film reminder dial, okay? There are numbers in white, numbers in green, and numbers in orange. The white ones you would use for black and white, so if you had 400 speed black and white film in the camera, just as a reminder, it has no function other than that. Right now I have it set to 400 if it was black and white film. If I was using color print film, I would use one of the orange numbers, and for slide film, I might use one of the green numbers. So just as a reminder of what I have in the camera. It has a fixed eye-level pentaprism finder, which the view through this camera, there is all it is a focusing screen and a microprism spot in the center. It's a very large view. With the 55mm lens, it gives you a life-size view. It's a very uncluttered, plain viewfinder. It's really nice and very easy to focus. It snaps in and out of focus better than most, even more expensive camera focusing screens. So I'm very impressed with that. Let's look at the bottom of the camera. Again, very basic. We have our tripod socket and our rewind button. Okay, you press that into rewind film. It rotates, and it has a little R on it. You'll notice that rotating when we rewind the film. Okay, so we're going to show you how to load film in a minute or two. We have the back of the camera. Again, it's very basic. We have a viewfinder. It does take some accessories, a right angle finder, a magnifier, a rubber eye cup. An accessory shoe actually would slide onto this. To open the back, we just pull up on this latch here. Okay, and the back springs open. Again, it's very basic inside. A rubberized cloth focal plane shutter. And as I always say, talking about these cameras, just stay away from touching that shutter, whether cleaning the camera, loading the camera. You can cause some damage. Has a multi-slotted take-up spool. Now I'm going to get a roll of film and show you how to load this thing. Okay, this is a bulk roll that I had loaded myself. So if the leader doesn't look normal to you, that's why I cut it myself. So to load film, we're going to just push up on the shaft of the rewind knob, and we're going to place it back down. Okay, now I position the take-up spool so one of the slots is pointed up. Okay, I'm just going to insert the leader into one of these slots. Now I just did a video on the Canon FT, which has the quick load system, and much easier camera to load. Now to me that didn't catch. See, got to make sure it catches. I'm just going to bring it back and try that again. Just make sure it gets in there good. Okay, and then we're going to, there we go, I think it worked that time. Okay, I'm going to make sure before I close the back that the sprocket holes on the film are engaged with the sprocket on the camera, both top and bottom. So I'm just going to advance a little bit more film. Okay, and you can take up a little bit of slack if you like with the rewind knob. Now we're going to close the back. Okay, and this back just snaps closed. Now we have to make a few blanks to get rid of that film that was exposed while we were loading. What I always suggest is unfold the rewind crank. Okay, now as I advance film, I want to make a few blanks. Now watch that rewind crank. You see it turning? If that rewind crank is turning, that means the film is going through the camera. Okay, if that rewind crank wasn't turning, that would mean that the film came off of the leader and we'd have to open it up and reload it. Now let's say we're done taking our pictures. We shot 36 or 24 great images, and now we need to rewind film. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to press that button in on the bottom, unfold our rewind crank, and just rewind it back in. As we're rewinding, that rewind button on the bottom also revolves, and once we wind it all back in, we just pop open the back and we can remove our cassette. Sometimes it's easier to do it this way. Just a couple things about the lens. With the screw mount lens, there's no lens release lock. You just turn it counterclockwise to remove. Okay, and very simple construction, these lenses, but very, very well made. There's only this one control in the back which stops the lens down. There's, when you press the shutter release, okay, you'll see this plate on the bottom. As the mirror flips up, let's do this at a slower speed. As the mirror flips up, you will see this plate here. That moves forward to stop the lens down and hits this little pin on the lens. Okay, so very basic. You also notice one other thing on these lenses, on these Takumar lenses. They have a switch for auto or manual. In auto, the auto diaphragm functions. Okay, the lens stays at full aperture until the moment of exposure. If we place it on M, the lens is stopped down. Okay, so we could do that to observe depth of field. There's really no depth of field button on this camera, but there is, you do have this switch here on the lens if you want to observe depth of field. Now we'll just put this lens back on. All right. One thing I neglected to mention when I was talking about the shutter speed dial, if you go beyond 500th of a second, you will notice there's another click stop there before you get to the T setting. This is close to, it may be a full 1,000th of a second or close to it. It's not marked, but that will give you approximately 1,000th of a second, okay, or a little less. One other thing with this camera is if you wear eyeglasses, you cannot see the entire screen. So you've got to move your eye around in order to see the entire screen. That's the one negative about the viewfinder, but like I said earlier, it's very easy to focus, snaps in and out of focus very easily. It's a pleasure to focus this camera. In 1964, Pentax came out with the Spotmatic, which was one of the first cameras with through-the-lens metering. Took the same lenses, the same 42mm screw thread lenses. And I did a video on that camera a while back, and I will put a link in the description below to the video on the Spotmatic. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I come out with a new video every Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. So I will talk to you next time.